Hello everybody, so today this is another tutorial video. This tutorial video is for how to make this lined hooded jacket. This jacket is one of my favourite jackets and you can build it too. This video includes how to sew the lining, it includes how to sew the sleeves, the hood, how to install the zip, how to do everything from start to finish so you come out the other end with a finished jacket. This video starts off with all the pre-made pattern pieces, stuck them all together and I've cut them out if you're interested in how to do that, and then there is a video that comes with that download and it basically shows you how to stick all of the pages together and cut them out so you get accurate panel pieces for your chosen size. Let's get into it. Oh yeah, and before you start this process, there is a tools and materials page that I've provided for you. And here it tells you everything you need to be able to create this jacket. You need fabric markers or chalk. I like to use wax. You need fabric scissors, and then you need a measuring tape and a ruler. You need a seam ripper. In my case, I like to use a blade. You need an iron. You need a sewing machine. You can make this on a domestic machine. You don't need one of my industrial machines. You can do this on a home sewing machine. And then for hardware, you need one open end zipper. You need 100 inches of elastic cord. In my case, I'm going to use paracord. You need 6 cord stoppers. You need 10 eyelets. And then you need any additional hardware like rivets and zips and stuff like that. You need 80 inches by 40 inches for your outer fabric. And then I say just do the same amount for your lining fabric. And then any additional patches and stuff like that that you want to add on top. But in my case, for this video, I am literally just making this out of blue denim as a very simple lining, just to show you how easy this is. Anyone can make this jacket. So you should be left with something like this, which is all your pattern pieces, and then your pattern itself can just move to the side. You don't need that at the moment. Basically, all of these pattern pieces are your arms, your hood, your back piece, your front piece. On these pattern pieces, it basically says you need to cut 2 outer fabric and you need to mirror it. And then it says you need to cut 2 times lining fabric and then mirror that too. On some of them, it only says you need to cut 1, but basically follow this indication and cut out your fabric, and then you should have all of your pattern pieces ready to stitch. So I'm going to use my pins and I'm just going to pin around all of the fabric. And something to mention before, you should have a page in your book which, whenever this line is facing up, that is an indication to your grain lines. As you can see here, my grain line is going diagonal and that should correspond with the straight line. So just to make sure, when it says cut 2 outer fabric and then mirrored, you've already cut one this side with the images this side. You basically want to cut your next one with this facing down. An easier way to do that is to fold your fabric in half and then just cut one piece out. But in my case, I didn't do that. So the next arm piece I'm cutting is this side, and the same with the back. This needs to be turned around and cut that way. So you can see here, I've basically folded my lining over so there is 2 layers, and then I've layered on top all my panel pieces. And again, the reason I've done that is because it mirrors the fabric. So I've now cut out all of my lining pieces, and pretty much now your whole pattern is finished. So you can just throw that over to the side over here. You don't need that anymore. Let's get to sewing. Right, so just for a better view of what's going on here, you basically have the hood pattern pieces here, you have the front panel pattern pieces here, and then you have the arm pattern pieces here and the back pattern piece over there. What we're going to tackle first is the hood. And the reason we're going to tackle this hood first is because I think it can be quite complicated to someone who has never sewn a hood before. So we're going to take this slow and we're going to do the hood first. So that's done, out the way, and then we'll move on to the front panels. So what is going on right here? Let me explain. So This is the side hood panel, this is the top hood panel, this is going to wrap around the top of your head, and this is the other side hood panel. This is a 3-piece hood, and the reason I've done that is so you get that nice sort of curved top to it, rather than it just being 2 pieces you stitch together like a hoodie. What you want to do is you want to turn these 2 corners front facing, and you're basically on this longer sort of top part here, you are basically stitching this corner, so just like that, and you're rotating this slowly until you've stitched the whole thing. Once you have that, you can see that if you turn it outside in, so the right side, you can see it sort of starts to make sense what you're doing here. You're essentially just constructing this hood shape. To clean this up, you want to run a top stitch, so essentially folding that inside seam over to one side, and you want to run a top stitch all the way along that hood. So now you've done this, you essentially want to do the exact same thing, but from the other side. It's starting to take shape. So what we want to do now is we're going to add a big piece of hardware, but we need to add this piece of hardware now rather than later, because if we don't add it now, you can't do it later pretty much. So let's do that. Essentially, we'll want to be adding an eyelet just around this area here before the curve, but not too close to this edge because we're going to be folding this later. And I'm going to add an eyelet with my eyelet press, which is over here. If you don't have one of them, you can pick up these for like £7 on eBay or anywhere. They're just a rivet sort of eyelet press. And like I said, we're just going to put an eyelet right here and then matching on the other side. Nice and simple, I'm just marking with a Sharpie. And it should look a little something like this. Now what this is basically doing, just to explain, is this is where your paracord / elastic cord is going to come through, and then you're basically going to stitch that paracord down in here, and then this paracord's going to run out, there's going to be a little adjustment area, and then you're going to run a stitch when everything's together around this hood, so then it sort of traps your paracord into this little section, and then when you pull it tight on these areas here, it should tighten your hood a little bit. So you want to grab your lining and pretty much sew it together the exact same way you've done this, and this is the part which is going to sit inside the hood as lining. If your seam allowance is off, then you're going to have certain parts which are a little bit longer than the line that it should follow. You can just trim these off, but just make sure you follow the line. So if I'm cutting that, I'm just going to cut that in. And if I'm cutting this, I'm just going to cut that down. It won't make too much of a difference visually once the jacket's done. You can just trim stuff off. It shouldn't make too much of a difference. So basically now you've got the lining stitched together exactly the same way that you stitched the outer, and you've added these 2 eyelets to the place which is not too close to this edge. Then you want to put this one inside this one. You want to put the lining inside the outer shell, but how do you do that? You basically want to match them up by placing the lining one just on top of the outer shell and lining up all of the stitch marks. And just to make this easier, you can grab some pins. You can start to see when this gets folded around the hood, it should join up there. And in the end, the inside of all your fabric should be facing outwards, so you will start to see messy seams here. But what you're doing now is you're running a stitch all the way around this line, all the way up here and all the way around to this edge. And you're not, let me repeat this again, you are not stitching down this. You're just following that line up and you're stitching round to the edge. So now you've stitched that, what you want to do is you want to turn it inside out. Just to see what you're doing, you can run a little pin on that folded edge there. And you can start to see now that this is taking place to be a hood. And just as a clarification, the reason we did not sew this down is because later on in the process you'll be folding this in to put the zip. The zip will be running all the way up to there, so these parts will fold inwards. But yeah, so now you're starting to see a hood. So you've now got a hood which is lined, and to take this that step further, and the reason why we've done these eyelets over here, you want to grab your paracord, your elastic rope, or in my case just rope, and you're connecting this rope in the middle of these two bits of fabric through this hole, and it's going to run all the way along this edge to your other eyelet there. If I put the hood on and you're trying to tighten it here and here, then like it's obviously going to tighten this bit here. So where we need the rope to be is all around this top part, just like that. So this is now how you want to thread one side of your rope or elastic. You need to go through the toggle stopper, round, through the toggle stopper again. To make this easier, I added some sellotape on the edge of the rope so it threaded through easier. This short end is going to be sewn down in here, and then this longer end is going to thread all the way through around the top of the hood, and then it will come out, and then you're threading it again the same way as you did on that side, threading it here, and then you're sewing that bit down there. As you go, you should be able to put your arm in this and keep pulling that rope along, and you're throwing pins in, and these sort of act as like a tack, so it holds this rope in this little section here all the way around. So now you've threaded it through, and your rope should be sat in between these pins and this end seam here, and you can feel it. It should be right there. Basically you want to thread the smaller part through the same eyelet, pull it from the inside, pin through the rope, so that rope is not moving from that position now. On the other side, what you're doing is you're just doing the same thing where you're adding that toggle in the middle, and again you can use sellotape so it threads through easier. So this is starting to look like a hood now. What I'm going to do just to finish this is I'm just going to run a back and forth stitch on this rope so it stays in the same place. It will add a little stitch accent too, which could be pretty cool. We've essentially locked the rope in, and then it flows all the way around the hood to the other side, and then you've locked it in again. So whenever you pull this, then it will tighten up the hood. But for us to be able to lock in this rope so it stays on the edge and it doesn't fall down the hood as you're wearing it, we want to run a stitch all the way round. So to clean this up, what I'm going to do is I'm going to run a stitch all the way around that eyelet, and this can be by eye. It doesn't need to be perfect, but the more you can match it up symmetrical, the better you're going to get. So this is what you should have in the end. You should have locked down your rope, and then this should be flowing all the way through that little gap between your stitch mark and the outside seam. And yes, I have been stitching for like 8 years, so maybe I made that look easy, but just take it slow. You can always use the edge of your foot to line up with the eyelet as you go round. So we now have a hood, and the zip is going to run all the way up here. We didn't want to sew that down, and we don't want to sew any of the underneath down. And this is looking good. Let's move on to the next stages. So the next part of our video is these two front bits. As you can see, they're quite bland, and the reason that they are bland is because there is no pockets. You want to be able to put stuff in your pockets whilst you're wearing your jacket. So there is many ways you can build pockets. You could do a welted pocket, you could do some cargo pockets, you can do so many different types of zipper pockets. What I'm planning on doing is adding all my pockets and pocket designs as a product on my website for like £5. Post jack here, basically I think I described that really badly. It's not that I'm just trying to specifically put like welted pockets behind a paywall so it's harder for you to make the jacket. It's more so a fun thing because I'm selling the jacket patterns, and then you can add on to your order like whatever pockets you want to have on your jacket. So it'll be like a fun mix and match sort of like thing that I'm going to be doing. So at the moment I'm not showing you the pockets, but you can go and find how to make a welted pocket on YouTube and then come back. It's not that complicated, but it would make my video too long if I added it. So yeah, jackets on the website as patterns, and then also you can add pocket designs, and then yeah, bit of fun. So as you can see, I kept it quite simple. I put a little welt bigger than sort of a normal welted pocket. I put another one, then a little cargo pocket with this aluminium little clip here, and that was my pocket design. So as you can see now, it's starting to take a tiny bit of shape with the hood, so you can sort of envision what the hood would look like with the two front panels here. Let's get on to the next step of construction. Been quite a few hours since the last clip. Essentially I just went and got some food and chilled out a little bit, but essentially the next step of the process is putting the two front pieces together with the back piece, and then that will give us our armhole, so then we can put the arms in, connect the hood, connect the lining, and do all that, and then create the jacket. So as you can see here, a lot of the side pieces of each fabric actually match up together, and the reason this is because when this folds over, you can see that it will gradually make the jacket. So you can see that this top seam matches up with that top seam, and you can see that this side seam matches up with this side seam. So what we're doing is we're basically sewing this line to this line, we're sewing this shoulder piece to this shoulder piece, and we're doing that front facings, and we're doing that with this side, and we're doing that with that side too. We basically just want to flip that over so that it matches with this line and this line. Is to add a few pins in this to line it up, add a few pins in this to line it up, sew them, and then what I'm going to do to clean up the process, just like we did on the hood, is I'm going to top stitch all the way around. So I'm going to sew this down, I'm going to sew this down, and then I'm going to top stitch this, and then do the same on the other side. So you can see now that once this is turned back the way that it should be, and I've top stitched it down, I always run the top stitch so the fold is facing the front side of the jacket, and then you're just stitching that down. The same with this, you can start to see that this curve is coming in now with that pattern that we've made, and then the same top stitch on the back side. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to do the exact same procedure that we just did for all them three panels, the front, the other front, and the back panel, but we're going to do it for the lining on the inside. So we've just sewn all this together, and before we go any further with the next step, I basically just want to circle back round to this front panel. And the same as what we did with the hood, we're just adding a little eyelet just about an inch away here, like an eyelet about there. Basically is going to just cinch in the whole bottom of the jacket, so you can choose to toggle it. The same with the hood. Basically phrase the fact that you don't necessarily need to add these things that I've showed you how to add on the hood. You don't need to add that to the bottom, you don't need to add it to the arms, because you don't necessarily need the cinching on the jacket. You can just crop it up a little bit if you choose to want to wear a cropped jacket. But for this, I'm going to add the eyelets, and then we're going to do the whole process again where we're threading it round, putting the little cord stoppers on, and that's just what I like to do with these jackets because they come out looking sweet. So next we're going to move on to the sleeves, and for the sleeves you're going to need to focus on sewing one at a time. There's going to be 4 of these, so you've got 2 to do for the outer shell and 2 to do for the lining, and each sort of sleeve has 2 panels to it. It has this big panel and then it has this side panel, and the reason this is split into 2 and not just one big sort of panel is because there is this curve, as you can see, that follows all the way down, and it's matched with this curve on the small sleeve. The reason I've added this curve is because naturally people don't really stand, hold on, let me show you. So naturally you don't really stand like this, do you? That is a very straight arm, and if this was one panel, the sleeve would naturally fall down, whereas now we have sort of bent the arms up and realised that people stand with a little bit of a bent elbow. The curve in this runs down the back of your arm, and the same way we sewn that front side panel where it's got that curve is the same way we're going to sew this sleeve. And it will basically just naturally give the sleeve a little bit of a curve towards the front. This is just pattern design, this is just accounting body movements. And yeah, let's sew that together and then we will get to the next steps. So just before we start the stitch, I'm going to give you a little tip. If you start sewing from this top edge here and try and line that point up and start stitching down this line, then once you turn it inside out, it will be kind of like that. So I recommend that you basically start from the bottom of the sleeve and sew up. Just turn it the other way and then stitch, connect them two front panels, stitch all the way down here, and then naturally that top point will match up perfectly. So what we're basically doing now, we've just top stitched that. I've done both sleeves and I've done both lining pieces, that one and that one underneath. So we're going to fold this in half and then we're going to sew down this line now. So front facings, we're going to sew from this line all the way up, and then there's a little bit of a fiddly bit in a minute where you're going to have to top stitch, but I'll show you how to do that. And to be able to make this clean, you could just leave it how it is. I can do this a little bit better on my industrial machine. This is probably the only thing that I'd probably have over people on a domestic machine. I'm just going to fold that seam over just like that, and then again we're just top stitching down. But as we're top stitching, we're just pulling through at the same time, because you're basically top stitching and you've got to get all of this extra material out of the way. As you can see, that just cleans up the sleeve a little bit more, having them two seams top stitched facing inwards, as you can see. You don't have to do it, but if you do it, it's an extra little detail. So essentially, I don't need to mention this right now, but just so you know for the future, just so you can understand a little bit more, this curve, as I mentioned, was just giving that extra bulge so that there was a little bit more of a curve to the sleeve. And this is the back of the sleeve, and this right here is the front of the sleeve. The next step of the process is attaching the arms to the outer shell. So the way that we're going to do this is turn the front panel and the front sort of shell inside out. Right, so let me make this make sense for you. Essentially, this curved stitch mark here, this sort of seam, this was just for adding weight to the sleeve so that obviously it nicely goes round your elbow, adding a little bit more weight to it. This bottom seam here is essentially the bottom of your sleeve. So if you make it so your bottom seam is at the bottom of your sleeve and you unfold it, you'll see that this curve follows all the way up. So you want to connect this bottom seam up with the bottom seam, and then you want to connect this top of the curve point to your shoulder. And this basically, if you do this bit wrong, then it basically means that your sleeve is going to naturally sit up here. You want your sleeve to naturally sit so it falls down rather than up. These stitch marks should be on the back of your jacket because they are just the back part. If I put it on, you'll be able to see. Realise that that is on the back. You basically just want to slide your sleeve into the inside out jacket, and then all you're doing is, because your sleeve is the right side up and your jacket is inside out, you should have front facings. Moving it around and connecting that seam there. As I mentioned, it's the side seam of the jacket with the bottom seam of your sleeve. It's all confusing, but I hope that makes sense. So it should look something along the lines of this. You've basically pinned the sleeve in. Now you want to do the same for the other side, and then we'll get to the machine. So So now you're professionals at top stitching. You want to turn the jacket back the right way, and this is going to be quite fiddly. There's a lot of manoeuvring and you've got to take it slow, but you're essentially just top stitching that sleeve down, but you're doing it so the jacket overlaps the sleeve. You're not doing it so the sleeve overlaps the jacket. If you did it so the sleeve overlapped the jacket, it would look a little bit weird. And what I mean by that, now you've top stitched a few things, you kind of gather that like the top stitch should be the right way round, otherwise it will just look a bit odd. So yeah, you're basically doing it so the fold goes underneath the main panel of the jacket, then you're stitching it down so it looks like the sleeve's coming out of the jacket. If that makes sense? So as you can see, we're now starting to get that shape, and we've just top stitched down that sleeve, which looks really clean, and we've done the exact same to the other side. I rarely make items of clothing that are just simple with no print on. I haven't done it in years, to be honest, but whenever I do it, I do get reminded why it's so good. And I'm probably going to rock this myself every single day, so yeah. Well, before we get to the next steps, you need to do the exact same process as what you just did, sewing inside of the arms to the inside of the jacket, and then top stitching it down. You need to do the exact same process with the lining, and then we'll move on. Sounds good. So, the next part of the process is pretty much putting everything together. As you just saw, you've basically got all your 3 panels, and it's just constructing everything so it goes together now. And the way, in very short terms, that I do that is I pretty much sew the bottom together, and then I sew the hood together inside out, and then I turn all of these outside in, and then the only seams that are left are the sleeves that haven't been done and the zip. And then pretty much you sew the zip in, and then you sew the sleeves together, and then you have a completely finished seamless jacket. So that is what I'm going to do, but just pay very close attention to all the steps that I take with this. I'm going to obviously try and explain them, but this is a super important bit, because if you mess this up, then your whole jacket, you know, you might just have to get that seam ripper out. So first, actually, we're just going to move this lining to the side for now, and we're going to grab the hood. And the reason I told you earlier not to sew this part together was mainly because now what we can do is we can line this hood up front facings. So you want to move the bit of lining out the way of the hood, because you're not sewing the lining of the hood down, you're just sewing the outer fabric of the hood to the top neckline, and you're connecting it up from one side to the other. It should fit perfectly, and you're just running a stitch all the way along that edge. You're basically sewing the hood in, but you're leaving the lining. You're not stitching that yet. So you can really see this is starting to take shape now. You've obviously just sewn your hood to the jacket, but the reason you've left this lining piece is because now you're pretty much going to take your lining, and we're now going to put this into there. You're going to flip the jacket over. We're going to be working along this line here. Grab your lining, and again, front facings. You just want to place that down and line it up. And I've just pinned all of that bottom front facing all the way to the edge, and I'm going to sew it now, if you didn't guess. Now this bit is quite fiddly, but what you want to do, now you've sewn that line, is basically you want to grab your neckline of your lining, and then you want to find, again, the bottom of the hood, but this time the lining side. And as you can see, we're slowly connecting the whole jacket up. now you've got this mess. And pretty much what this mess is pretty much a finished jacket. Let's turn it inside out. And when you turn it inside out, you'll start to understand what's going on. There's like 3 more things to do before the whole jacket is fully completed. And the first thing being putting in the zipper. The second thing being the cinching on the sleeve / the sort of cuffs, and then putting the cuff together. And then the third thing, the cinching on the bottom of the jacket. Now we can't do the cinching after the zip has been put in because we won't have enough space, and this kind of opening won't be there once the zip's put in. So we're going to do the cinching on the bottom of the jacket first, then we're going to put the zip on, then we're going to do the arms. Sound like a plan? Let's go. So I feel like I don't need to explain the cinching on the waist because it is the exact same as the cinching on the hood. You're pretty much just doing the whole toggle thing again, but you're just putting the smaller side through this side, and then you're doing all the way around the bottom of the jacket, all the way around, and then you're doing the cinching on here. So this is so you can pull this one, and then it will sort of cinch in the jacket in the bottom. It will create that sort of circular shape that we're going for. So yeah, let me do it. I'll film it still, but I don't really need to explain it because it's the same process as doing the hood. So I had a little bit of problem with the toggles. I didn't get the right size rope, so I have to keep like sticking tape around them and shoving them through the holes, but it's now 1:30 in the morning and I can't be bothered to do that. So I should have just been more prepared with some elastic. So for the cinching on the bottom of the jacket, I've just done this little sort of tie together thing, and I'll show you how I'm going to incorporate that later. But let's get on to the next step. So the next step is adding a zip all the way down the opening here. And the way we're going to do this is we're pretty much going to iron this down and put a little 1/2 inch fold and then a 1/2 inch fold that side. So eventually we should be left with something that looks like that. So you basically want to iron a 1/2 inch fold all the way down. Now you have just ironed this kind of 1/2 inch sort of fold, give or take. It doesn't need to be perfect. You essentially want to grab your zipper, and from the top of your zipper you just want to pin it in. But I'm lining this up from the top because I've got a smaller zipper, and pretty much, so if I line this up from the top, it will have that effect where the hood is nice and round, and then towards the bottom this is going to be cinched anyway, so you won't really see it. So I'm going to line this up and just push it into that hole, pin, push it into that hole, pin, push it into between these fabric pieces, pin, until you're all the way down, and then we're going to sew that in. that is the finished jacket. I hope you guys took loads of value from this video. It definitely took me a while to do too, to be honest. Well, yeah, I reckon in total it took me around 6 hours to create. It might take you about 2 days to create on and off, but that's up to how long it takes you to smash out all the pieces and how quick it takes you to sew certain bits, what sort of machine you have. But I truly believe this is beginner friendly. The pattern is available on my website. It's your turn to build this now and turn it into something insane. Use different fabric, use different lining, use different hardware bits. I want to see all of your different sort of variations of my pattern here. So yeah, hope you enjoyed the video. It's now like 2 AM here, so I'm sure you can see how tired I am, but the pattern is out there now, and I appreciate you all for sticking around. The videos and the vlog style content is definitely coming. I wanted to keep this one a little bit more tutorial based. I'm very, very happy with this. And yeah, I'll catch you in the next video. Go buy my pattern.